Hey guys, Greg here. Busy week in the news and in the media, so I'm here to make a quick video about the most significant cultural event that's happened in the last week. Of course, that is the death of the great comedian Bob Newhart. Now hold on, Bob Newhart was one of the biggest recording artists of his day. And those of you that are my age, we grew up in the 70s, 80s with the Bob Newhart TV shows. He had two smash hit TV shows. But he actually had a career before that as a recording artist, really just a guy who played in clubs and they turned him into records. So Bob Newhart was 2 months, he died at 94, 2 months before his 95th birthday, and his career goes all the way back to about 1960. Now let me show you some of the stuff he did on vinyl, like the one I just showed you, but not. Bob Newhart's first album came out in 1960. We're going to talk about this record. And the most celebrated new comedian since Attila the Hun. He wanted that to be the title of the record, Attila the Hun. Warner Brothers didn't want that, so they made that the subtitle. So the title they went with is The Button-Down Mind of Bob Newhart. And Button-Down Mind kind of refers to, well, here's the mind itself, if you haven't seen the mind. There it is. How close can I get? That's focus right there. There's the button-down mind itself, and it's got cute little pictures of some of the topics that he talks about. Anyway, the button-down mind is sort of a nod to him being sort of a mild-mannered, sort of conservative, sort of dull, Midwestern accountant. He was an accountant before he started doing stand-up. So Warner Brothers Records had just became a thing in 1958, and they really struggled for their first couple of years. They didn't really have any huge hits. For a company that had such a legacy in movies, they got off to a very rocky start. And this guy, Dan Sorkin, who was a DJ, he wrote the liner notes on this. He was a DJ who was aware of Bob Newhart's nightclub act, and he suggested Warner turn it into a record. Well, what have we got to lose? The production costs on the records are next to nothing. No one had heard of Bob Newhart at that time, for the most part. This record shot up to #1. Number 1 on the Billboard charts in 1960. Not number 1 on the comedy chart. I don't think they had a comedy chart. This was the #1 record on the Billboard charts. All the charts. Beat out all the music people. Number 1 on the charts, I think it was 14 weeks in 1960. And so the next year he won a bunch of Grammys for this record. Album of the Year. There was a category for spoken word and comedy album of the year, which he won that also, but he just won the general album of the year award as well as best new artist. And no comedy person has ever won best new artist since then. This album was a smash success. Later that same year, they did a sequel, a follow-up album. Same year, Bob Newhart, The Button-Down Mind Strikes Back. This was also 1960. Both of these records occupied #1 and #2 on the Billboard charts at the same time. Has any other artist done that ever? I don't know. Somebody's going to tell me Taylor Swift has, but does she count? I mean, she dominates everything. But this is the thing, man. Bob Newhart. Now, what made Bob Newhart so popular? What was so special about him? And one reason I'm making this video is you guys see me a lot on YouTube and on Instagram. And I was on one of Rachel's streams, and a couple people said, "Oh, Greg has this very dry sense of humor." I would agree with that, but usually I think of my sense of humor as part of this Jewish tradition. You know, the Jewish comedians from Brooklyn, that have dominated comedy and the comedy business for decades. But Bob Newhart, maybe he's a little bit of an influence on me with his dry Midwestern vibe. I'm from the Midwest. I'm from St. Louis. And Bob Newhart is from somewhere, but he has sort of a Midwestern kind of a vibe. He works clean. His humor is dry. He doesn't do jokes. He doesn't come out there and do jokes. He doesn't do stand-up. He does these skits, and this was very innovative at the time. So he does these skits, and he's very knowledgeable and well-read. And a lot of his humor is based on history, which is strange for today's fans. You don't see a lot of comedians getting out there and doing history. So the very first thing on here on side 1, this ended up being his most famous skit of all time, Abraham Lincoln versus Madison Avenue. Madison Avenue like Mad Men. And this was a common theme in his comedy, which was these anachronisms, this fish out of water. This skit is based on, what if Abe Lincoln had a modern-day Madison Avenue advertising marketing guy? He's talking about how this agent advertising guy would have changed up the Gettysburg Address to make it kind of hipper with the current audiences. Doesn't sound funny the way I'm doing it. I'm not doing it. You got to go listen to the record. But my point is, like a lot of comedians, they are observing and commenting on the foibles of modern society. And that's exactly what he was doing. He was talking about the shallowness of today's advertising, marketing, focus groups. The shallowness and the, what's the word I'm looking for? Compared to Abe Lincoln. It's like, what if Abe Lincoln was subjected to the same focus groups and think tanks and advertising and marketing consultants that we use today in politics? Today's politics are full of these. Well, we don't know what to say. We don't know what our politicians should say until we focus group it, until we test the audience. Whereas back in the olden days, they had people who like, hey, this is what I'm saying. I don't need to read a marketing study to find out if it's popular. Abe Lincoln, the merchandising, the Wright brothers, very similar concept. The Khrushchev landing rehearsal. A private in Washington's army. That skit is like, what if a private was kvetching the whole time about crossing the Delaware and how much hassle that was? An infinite number of monkeys. A take on that thing about, what an infinite number of monkeys be able to produce the works of Shakespeare. Bob, again, he didn't do stand-up. He did this skit with a telephone. Telephones look nothing like they did then, but this looks more like a telephone. He would stand on stage with a telephone, and he would pretend he was talking to somebody. And he would have to reflect what the other person is saying without them, they're not there. Oh, you did what, Mr. President? Oh, I see. And the jokes often come at what is not said, as what is implied. Oh, Mr. President, how are you doing? Your wife did what? Oh, she left it on the counter, huh? Oh, the Secret Service found a bag? I'm making it up as if it was Biden. But the jokes are there for the audience to be smart enough to figure out, which doesn't happen much anymore. All these records are available at thrift stores for $1 or less. And you can listen to all this stuff online for free. And it may be too dry and boring for modern audiences, but take it from me, it was massive in its day. Bob Newhart, congratulations on 94.9 great years and being a comedy influencer and a recording star. That's enough. Thank you. Bye. Is this thing on or off? On, off, on, off.